Hey everyone, and welcome back. You sent us a ton of articles about this new appointment, and we are ready to dive in.
You bet.
The appointment of Dan Bongino as the new deputy director of the FBI.
Right.
Now, this is not your typical new guy at the top, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, typically we see, someone rise through the ranks of the FBI to take
Okay.
on a role like this. But Dan Bongino's background is, well, let's just say it's a bit more diverse.
Diverse is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
This guy has been in the Secret Service,
Yeah.
the NYPD. He was a Fox News commentator.
Right.
And now a huge podcast.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to, analyze what all this means for the FBI. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think his background is actually a great place to start.
Okay.
I mean, it's not every day you see someone jump from conservative media personality to a top spot at the FBI.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
Some of these articles mentioned his master's degree in psychology and an MBA, which, is pretty impressive on paper. But then you've got his very public political stances. Didn't he run for office a few times?
He did, yeah, 3 times, in fact,
Well,
for both Congress and the Senate.
Okay.
But he wasn't successful in those bids. And, of course, we can't forget his very vocal support for Donald Trump.
Right, the main GA movement.
Exactly.
So how do you think all of that's going to play out? I mean, is he going to be able to separate his personal political beliefs from his work at the FBI?
Right.
Because some of these articles are raising some concerns about potential bias.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's something that a lot of people are worried about, especially given the FBI's, recent history.
Right.
The January 6th investigation, the leadership shakeup. It's all created a very sensitive atmosphere.
And then there's the fact that Trump himself announced Bongino's appointment on Truth Social.
Right.
I actually have a little bit from the Post here.
Okay.
Trump writes, Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has just been named the next deputy director of the FBI by the man who will be the best ever director, Kash Patel. He goes on to say that fairness, justice, law, and order will be brought back to America and quickly.
Oh.
Talk about a bold statement.
It's definitely a classic Trump move.
Right.
Choosing Truth Social for the announcement, the strong language about loyalty and bringing back law and order.
Right.
It all speaks directly to his base.
Yeah.
And it bypasses those traditional channels that he tends to avoid.
But it also seems like he's setting some pretty high expectations, right?
Sure.
I mean, what does bringing back law and order actually mean in this context?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that we'll need to keep in mind as we delve deeper into this appointment.
Okay.
But it seems to suggest a desire to reshape the FBI,
Okay.
potentially aligning it more closely with his own political agenda.
And then you have the new FBI director, Kash Patel,
Yes,
who is also a close Trump ally.
that's right.
And he's been pretty vocal about his plans to reshape the Bureau as well,
Yeah.
talking about relocating employees and shifting focus back to traditional crime fighting.
Right. And those plans are raising eyebrows, too.
Yeah.
Some people are wondering if this emphasis on traditional crime fighting might come at the expense of investigating things like white-collar crime or cyber crime, which are increasingly important in today's world.
So we've got these two Trump loyalists at the helm of the FBI, both promising to shake things up.
Yeah.
What does this all mean for the future of the Bureau? What kind of changes are we actually likely to see?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
Right.
But before we jump into that, I think we need to take a closer look at some of Bongino's own words.
Okay.
Because he hasn't been shy about sharing his opinions about the FBI, even before this appointment.
You're right. In fact, there's an article here that mentions Bongino calling the FBI a failed agency
Wow.
during an interview with Trump last fall.
Oh, wow.
He even blamed them for not preventing 2 assassination attempts against Trump. That's pretty strong stuff coming from someone who's now in charge of the agency.
It is. And those comments give us some valuable insights into his mindset going into this role.
Yeah.
He clearly sees the need for a major overhaul, and he's not afraid to challenge the status quo.
Okay, so we've got Bongino, this outspoken critic of the FBI,
Right.
now in a position of authority within that very same agency. It seems like there's bound to be some tension, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, imagine being a career FBI agent who's dedicated your life to upholding the law, and now you've got this conservative media personality telling you how to do your job.
That's a really interesting point. And it's not just about personal clashes. It's
Right.
about different philosophies, different approaches to law enforcement. Bongino comes from a very different world than the traditional FBI agent, and it remains to be seen whether those two worlds can coexist peacefully.
Yeah, it's almost like two completely different cultures are about to collide,
Yeah.
each with their own set of values and beliefs. And the outcome of that collision, I mean, that could have a profound impact on the future of the FBI.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique situation. I mean, we've seen this kind of tension play out, in other areas of government when administrations try to implement sweeping changes.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see how this dynamic unfolds within the FBI,
Yeah.
especially given its history and its reputation.
Speaking of Bongino's history, we can't ignore his very public criticism of the FBI, particularly his focus on what he calls politically motivated investigations.
That's right. He specifically targeted the Secret Service, which, of course, he was once a part of. But his criticisms could easily be applied to the FBI as well.
Right.
He seems to believe that both agencies have become ineffective and that they need a major overhaul. He's even gone so far as to say that they've been weaponized against conservatives.
And now he's in a position to potentially change that from the inside. I mean, some people are saying that this is a chance for real reform, a chance to, root out corruption and restore public trust in the FBI.
Right.
But others are worried that he'll use his position to, further a partisan agenda.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And it's going to be crucial to see how he navigates these challenges.
Right.
Because if he uses his power to, target political opponents or silence dissenting voices, it could have serious consequences for the rule of law and public trust in law enforcement.
So what does all of this mean for the future of the FBI? We've got a president appointing two strong allies to leadership positions, both of whom have expressed a desire to shake things up.
Right.
What kind of impact could this have on the Bureau's reputation and effectiveness?
Well, it's tough to predict with certainty.
Right.
On one hand, bringing in outsiders with fresh perspectives could lead to some much-needed reforms.
Okay.
And a renewed focus on core priorities.
Yeah.
They could streamline processes, improve communication,
Right.
modernize the agency to better address, emerging threats.
But on the other hand,
There's a real risk of further politicizing the FBI.
right.
If Bongino and Patel use their positions to advance a partisan agenda or target political opponents, it could severely damage the Bureau's credibility and independence.
And that could have a ripple effect throughout the entire justice system, right?
Absolutely.
People might be less likely to cooperate with investigations.
Right.
Juries might be more skeptical of evidence.
Sure.
And it could even lead to an increase in civil unrest.
It's a complex situation with a lot of potential outcomes.
It is.
We have to consider not only the internal dynamics of the FBI, but also the broader context of American politics.
Right.
Trump's return to the White House has been marked by deep divisions
Yeah.
and a resurgence of, populist, often divisive rhetoric.
And now he has two loyalists
Yeah,
in charge of the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency.
exactly.
It's a situation that demands close scrutiny
Yes.
and raises some very important questions.
Absolutely. Questions like, will Bongino and Patel be able to separate their personal political beliefs from their duties at the FBI? Will they uphold the Bureau's commitment to impartiality and independence? Or will they use their positions to further Trump's agenda?
I remember reading an article that quoted Bongino from his podcast,
Oh, okay.
where he talks about cleaning up the FBI.
Right.
Now, that sounds good on the surface.
Right.
But what does it actually mean in practice?
Well, based on his past statements, it seems like cleaning up involves rooting out what he perceives as corruption and bias within the Bureau.
Okay.
He's also talked about shifting focus away from what he considers politically motivated investigations like the January 6th probe and back to more traditional crime fighting.
Right, which aligns with Patel's stated goals.
Exactly.
But who gets to decide what's corrupt or biased or politically motivated?
Right.
What criteria will they use to make those judgments?
That's the big question. And it's one that has a lot of people worried. Because if those decisions are based on partisan considerations rather than objective evidence,
Yeah.
it could create a very dangerous situation where the FBI is used as a political weapon instead of an impartial law enforcement agency.
That's a chilling thought. So we've got potential for conflict within the FBI,
Yeah.
potential for the politicization of the Bureau,
Right.
and potential for the abuse of power.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything even remotely positive about this whole situation?
Well, it's important to remember that Bongino and Patel haven't actually done anything yet. They've just been appointed.
Right.
And it remains to be seen how they'll actually govern. It's possible that, they'll surprise us and prove their critics wrong.
So there's still a chance that they could rise to the occasion
Yeah.
and demonstrate a commitment to fairness and impartiality.
Sure.
Maybe they'll even win over some of their skeptics.
It's not impossible, but they have a lot to prove.
Right.
And they're going to be under intense scrutiny from day one. Their actions will speak louder than words.
Right.
And the American people will be watching closely.
So you're saying we should reserve judgment for now and wait to see how things unfold?
I think that's a prudent approach.
Okay.
We have to give them a chance to show us what they're made of.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Bongino's unconventional background.
Right.
Trump's motives, concerns about political bias. Patel's plans for the FBI. It's a lot to think about.
It is.
What stands out to you as like the most significant aspect of this whole situation?
For me, it's the potential for conflict. You have Bongino, who's been openly critical of the FBI, now in a position of authority within that very same agency.
Yeah.
That's bound to create tension,
Right.
both with the rank-and-file agents and with the Bureau's established procedures.
Like imagine being a career FBI agent who's dedicated your life to upholding the law, and now you've got this conservative media personality telling you how to do your job.
Exactly. And it's not just about personal clashes. It's about different philosophies, different approaches to law enforcement. Bongino comes from a very different world than the traditional FBI agent, and it remains to be seen whether those two worlds can coexist peacefully.
It's almost like two different cultures colliding, each with its own set of values and beliefs.
Exactly.
And the outcome of that collision could have a profound impact on the future of the FBI.
It's a fascinating case study in organizational change and the challenges of integrating outsiders into a deeply entrenched culture.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds, but it's certainly going to be an interesting ride.
Speaking of interesting rides, what about Bongino's podcast comments?
Right.
He's been pretty vocal about his plans for the FBI on his show.
Yeah.
And some of those comments have raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talked about cleaning up the FBI.
Uh-huh.
And as we discussed, that could mean a lot of different things.
Right.
But he's also hinted at wanting to root out what he sees as corruption and bias within the Bureau. And he's talked about shifting focus away from what he considers politically motivated investigations,
Right.
like the January 6th probe, and back to more traditional crime fighting.
Yes, and that aligns pretty closely with Patel's stated goals for the FBI.
It does?
It seems like they're on the same page in terms of wanting to reshape the Bureau's priorities
Yeah.
and potentially purge elements they deem disloyal.
And that's where things get really concerning for me, because who gets to decide what's corrupt or biased or politically motivated?
Right.
What criteria will they use to make those judgments?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that a lot of people are worried about because if those decisions are based on partisan considerations rather than objective evidence, it could create a very dangerous situation where the FBI is used as a political weapon rather than an impartial law enforcement agency.
And that brings us to another point, that some of these articles touch on the broader implications for American democracy. What does it say about the state of our country when a president can appoint two strong allies with such controversial views to lead the FBI?
Well, it's a reflection of the deep political divisions that we're seeing in America today.
Right.
There's a growing distrust of institutions and a sense that the system is rigged against certain groups.
Yeah.
And when you have a president who's willing to appoint loyalists with questionable qualifications to key positions, it further erodes public faith in the government.
It's like this vicious cycle. The more people lose trust in institutions, the more they turn to figures like Trump, who promised to drain the swamp and shake things up. But those very actions often end up causing more harm than good.
Exactly. It's a dangerous game, and it's important to be aware of the long-term consequences, because if we continue down this path, we risk undermining the very foundations of our democracy.
So where do we go from here? What can we as citizens do to ensure that the FBI remains a beacon of integrity and impartiality?
Well, for starters, we need to stay informed and engaged. Pay attention to what's happening, ask critical questions, and hold our elected officials accountable.
Don't just accept things at face value.
Right.
Do your own research.
Exactly.
Consult reliable sources and form your own opinions.
And don't be afraid to speak out. Contact your representatives, express your concerns, and demand transparency. Because at the end of the day, the FBI is supposed to serve the American people.
Right.
Not any particular political party or ideology.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. We've learned a lot about Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, and the challenges facing the FBI. I have to say it's a lot to process.
It is, and it's something that we all need to be thinking about.
Yeah?
The future of the FBI, and indeed the future of American democracy, may very well depend on what happens next.
So what's the one thing you really want our listener to take away from all of this?
Yeah.
What should they be thinking about as they go about their day?
I think the most important thing is to stay vigilant. Pay attention to what Bongino and Patel do, not just what they say. Hold them accountable for their actions and don't let the FBI become a tool for political gain. The stakes are simply too high.
Couldn't agree more. This is a story that's going to continue to unfold, and we'll be here to help you make sense of it all. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.